The golden sun climbed over the stone ramparts of Camelot, stretching long, thin shadows across the courtyard. Inside the castle, the morning bells rang out, a steady, rhythmic tolling that promised another day of quiet. Arthur stood on the high balcony, watching the white mist roll slowly over the valley floor. Everything was still. The air was crisp, and the light hit the stone with a soft, warm glow. Then, the birds stopped. The chirping that had filled the trees vanished in a single heartbeat, leaving behind a hollow, ringing silence. Arthur leaned forward, his hands gripping the cold stone railing. A sudden gust of wind whipped through the courtyard, but it carried no warmth from the sun. It was sharp, biting, and smelled of salt and wet iron. The mist in the valley began to churn, swirling against the current of the wind. Arthur watched the horizon, his breath hitching as the temperature plummeted. The peace of the morning had been severed. The air grew heavy, thick with a sudden, suffocating pressure that made the very stones of the castle seem to shudder. The fog did not dissipate. It tore open. From the northern horizon, the first dark shape cut through the white haze. It was not drifting. It was carving a path through the water with a speed that defied the lack of wind. Arthur squinted, his knuckles white against the balcony stone. The vessel was made of dark, weathered wood, its surface slick with sea spray. At the front, the prow was carved into the likeness of a snarling, multi-jawed beast, its eyes hollow and fixed forward. Then came a second ship, then a third, emerging in a silent, jagged line. They moved with a terrifying, rhythmic precision, slicing through the surf as if pulled by an unseen force. The water around them did not churn. It parted. Arthur watched as the fleet grew, one prow after another, piercing the mist until the entire horizon was filled with the dark, hulking silhouettes. The scent of salt and iron grew overwhelming, stinging the eyes. Each ship was a mirror of the last, a fleet of nightmares closing the distance. The lead ship hit the sand with a bone-jarring thud that echoed up to the castle walls. Before the hull had even settled, the figures on the deck moved. They launched themselves over the gunwales, landing in the surf with heavy, splashing impacts. Dozens of them hit the water at once. They stood upright in the knee-deep tide, their movements jerky and synchronized. A low, guttural growl rose from their throats. It was not a battle cry, but a sound of pure, unadulterated hunger. They surged forward, feet churning the wet sand. The coastal guards stood behind their wooden barricades, spears leveled, but their hands shook. The invaders ignored the pointed tips. They reached the barricades and slammed into them. The timber groaned, then splintered, snapping like dry twigs. The invaders poured through the gap, axes swinging in wide, lethal arcs, their growls deepening into a deafening roar. Arthur moved down the stone stairs, his boots striking the steps with rhythmic intent. He reached the sand just as the first wave of invaders pushed past the broken barricades. He did not shout, he signaled with a sharp, downward sweep of his arm. The scattered guards scrambled toward his position, their faces pale, their formations ragged. Arthur grabbed the nearest soldier by the shoulder, shoving him into line. "Lock them," he commanded. The guards slammed their shields together, edge to edge, creating a seamless wall of steel that caught the morning light. Arthur stepped directly behind the center of the line, his hand resting on the hilt of his sword. The berserkers saw the new obstacle and accelerated, their growls rising to a piercing frequency. They hit the shield wall with the force of a tidal wave. The impact sent a shockwave through the line, causing the guards to stumble, their boots carving deep furrows into the wet sand. Wood splintered as the invaders hammered their axes against the steel, the sound of metal on metal ringing out across the beach. The wall groaned under the pressure, bowing inward, but it held. Arthur pressed his back against the shields, feeling the vibration of every blow. He braced his feet, watching the gaps, waiting for the line to snap under the relentless, crushing weight of the assault. The pressure against the shields became a physical weight, forcing the knights to lean back until their muscles burned. Arthur watched as a spear tip found its mark, punching deep into a berserker's chest. The invader did not stumble. Instead, he gripped the shaft of the spear, using it to pull himself closer, his axe swinging in a brutal downward arc that split the shield in front of him. The knight behind the shield fell, and the gap widened. Another berserker surged into the breach, ignoring the blade that sliced across his side. He swung his weapon with terrifying, mindless persistence, hacking at the knights who tried to close the line. The formation began to buckle. One by one, the shields were forced apart, the steel wall losing its integrity as the invaders pushed through the gaps. The knights were shoved backward, their boots sliding through the mud. They tried to regain their footing, but the relentless, guttural roar of the attackers drove them further toward the castle gates. Arthur stepped back, his hand tightening on his sword hilt as the distance to the safety of the stone gates shrank with every desperate, backward step. The retreat was frantic, a chaotic scramble of boots and heavy breathing as the knights neared the castle gates. Arthur watched the gap between his men and the invaders vanish. He realized the shield wall was beyond repair. He stepped out from the cluster of retreating soldiers, moving against the flow of the panicked crowd. He reached for the hilt at his side. With a sharp, metallic rasp, he drew the blade. It did not catch the light as expected. Instead, the steel seemed to absorb the surrounding brightness. Then, the vibration began. A low, rhythmic hum traveled from the handle into his palm, rising in pitch until it resonated in his very teeth. The air around him grew heavy, thick with a static charge that made the hair on his arms stand up. He ignored the shouts of his men. He planted his feet, feeling the mud beneath his soles, and leveled the blade. The berserkers slowed, their growls faltering as they sensed the change. Arthur stood motionless, a singular point of calm in the center of the encroaching storm. He waited for the first swing, his grip steady. The first attacker lunged, his axe descending in a wide, whistling arc. Arthur did not retreat. He stepped into the swing, his blade meeting the iron head with a sharp, resonant clang. Sparks showered the mud. He twisted his wrist, sliding his blade along the length of the axe handle, and shoved the attacker off balance. Before the berserker could recover, Arthur pivoted, his movement a blur of fluid precision. He ducked a second swing that hissed inches above his head and countered with a strike that sent the attacker stumbling backward. The chaos of the battlefield seemed to slow around him. He moved between his exhausted knights, his blade tracing arcs of light. Whenever an axe threatened a fallen soldier, Arthur was there, his sword intercepting the blow with rhythmic efficiency. The hum of his blade grew louder, a constant, low-frequency thrum. He stood as a barrier against the tide. The circle tightened. 12 warriors closed the distance, their axes raised in unison. Arthur stood at the center, his boots sinking into the churned mud. He did not look at the faces surrounding him. His focus narrowed to the steel in his hand. The air began to behave strangely. It grew dense, pressing against his skin like deep water. A sudden, sharp crackle of static electricity snapped between the blades. They faltered, the rhythm of their advance breaking as the atmosphere warped. Arthur felt the hilt grow ice-cold, then searingly hot. He planted his feet wide, locking his stance into the earth. He raised the sword high above his head. As the blade climbed, the world around him seemed to lose its color, drained into a singular, suffocating gray. Then, the transformation ignited. A blinding, ethereal blue light erupted from the steel, casting long, distorted shadows. The hum of the sword shattered into a high-pitched, crystalline chime. Arthur held the glowing arc steady, his arms locked, his breath held. The energy gathered, swirling around the blade like a trapped storm. Arthur did not hesitate. He drove the tip of the glowing blade downward with every ounce of his remaining strength. The moment the steel touched the mud, the earth beneath him groaned. Deep, jagged fissures spiderwebbed outward from the point of impact, tearing through the sand and stone like paper. A shockwave of pure, condensed energy exploded from the epicenter. It was not a sound, but a physical wall of force that slammed into the surrounding warriors. The air rippled, turning the atmosphere into a blurred, violent distortion. The berserkers were caught in the blast, their feet lifted from the ground as if they had no weight at all. They were hurled backward through the air, tumbling like discarded dolls, their axes flying from their hands to clatter uselessly against the distant rocks. The force of the surge plowed a trench through the beach, churning up earth and debris in a massive, rising cloud. The ground shook violently, throwing the remaining standing soldiers off balance. Where there had been a dense, lethal formation of attackers, there was now only a broken, empty space. The energy continued to pulse, a blinding blue radiance that scoured the battlefield clean. Then, the pressure vanished. The silence that followed was absolute. The blue radiance flickered and died, leaving the beach in the dim light of late afternoon. The survivors did not rally. They scrambled to their feet, their movements erratic and desperate. The fury that had driven them onto the sand was gone, replaced by a hollow, frantic need to escape. They turned toward the water, stumbling over the debris and the churned earth, their eyes fixed only on the dark wooden ships waiting in the surf. They waded into the waves, abandoning their weapons. Arthur watched them go. He did not pursue. He stood in the center of the field, his boots firmly planted in the cooling mud, his chest heaved, each breath a sharp, ragged intake of air that burned his lungs. The adrenaline began to recede. Around him, the battlefield was still. No birds sang, no wind stirred the air. The silence was thick. Above the horizon, the sun began its final descent, bleeding into the clouds. It painted the sky in deep, bruised shades of crimson and violet. Arthur turned his back on the sea. Every step toward the castle gates felt heavier than the last, his boots dragging through the churned mud of the beach. He reached down to steady his hand, but his fingers would not stop shaking. The exertion of the battle lingered in his joints, a dull, throbbing ache that refused to subside. As he walked, a faint, rhythmic sensation traveled up his side. He stopped, his hand hovering over the hilt of the blade at his hip. The metal was not cold. It felt warm, almost feverish, against his palm. He pulled his hand away, but the vibration remained, a steady, thumping beat that synced with the frantic pace of his own heart. He looked down. A soft, ethereal light flickered deep within the steel, pulsing in time with the rhythm he felt in his nerves. It was not the blinding radiance of the shockwave, but a low, persistent glow that refused to fade. He took another step, and the light flared, a brief, sharp heartbeat of blue that illuminated the ground at his feet. The castle loomed ahead, silent and imposing, but the true threat was now at his side. He gripped the hilt tighter, trying to force the weapon into silence, but the pulse only quickened. It was a living, rhythmic pressure that defied his control. The battle had ended, yet the sword remained awake, waiting, its internal fire burning with a purpose that had nothing to do with the peace of the kingdom. He walked on, the rhythmic light pulsing against his leg, a constant, glowing reminder.